Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Venicia and this is the Woolly Worker Knitting Podcast YouTube channel, but today is not a podcast episode, it will just be a knit and chat. So there's a bit of roadworks in front of me and then my upstairs neighbor might be doing some work, so I really hope that we don't get disturbed too much, but this is the only time that's good for me to film, so we'll just have to do with what we have. So today I will be knitting and chatting, and I will be knitting on my muscle bra hat, which is with some hand-dyed yarn by Nervous Fiber in the colorway Buttered, and it's on a John Arbon Devonia base 4-ply. The muscle bra is a pattern by Isolde Teague, which is a hat that's like a very long stockinette tube that you fold in on itself to get a double thick hat, which is really nice and convenient and easy for me to work on while I speak. I'm notoriously bad at speaking and knitting at the same time, so I doubt that we will get much progress done, but the chat, I guess, is the cool part. But you're more than welcome to go and knit on your project. I'm sure you'll get some more progress done than I will. And let me know what you're working on as you're watching this knit and chat video. Last time I did one, it was a Q&A, and you guys had asked me questions on YouTube and on Instagram. By the way, you can find me on Instagram or also on Ravelry at thewoollyworker. If you want to follow me on different social media or message me there, you're more than welcome to. And if you also want to catch up on my other podcast, then I'm sure that you'll be able to find some on my YouTube channel in links on the side. I'm sure that YouTube suggests like other of my videos when you're watching some of them. Anyway, I'll start preparing the yarn. I wanted to do knit and chat because I've been having quite a lot of knitting related thoughts, and I've been planning for projects a lot, and I just kind of want to get it all out and out there. And I also wanted to hear some of your opinions on some of the topics I will talk about. So I don't have any script or anything planned, but what I'm kind of thinking, the direction that this is going to go will probably be around like knitting trends on Instagram. I'll keep it light, obviously, and I'm not an expert on any topic, but it's just stuff that I've been thinking about that I want to talk about. And I'm a bit nervous filming this without a set list of questions to answer. You know, my first thought is kind of thinking, oh gosh, am I going to be able to talk for like 45 minutes without someone to talk to? And then I'm thinking, well, you always struggle to keep your podcast less than an hour long. So I'm sure you'll be able to find some materials to talk about to yourself for 45 minutes. So we'll see. I hope that this is the kind of video that interests you and that you feel you can relax to. I prefer podcasts personally, but I do like the occasional knit and chat. I just find it difficult to... I'm just a bit nervous about being interesting, I guess, but I don't have to put too much pressure on myself because I know some people don't watch podcasters because they're interesting, but more because it's enjoyable or relaxing. You can also let me know if, like, why do you watch podcasts or why do you watch vlogs? Is it because you like the person? Is it because you like their editing? Do you like the knitting projects that they choose or the yarns that they use? Do you choose podcasters based on their location? Like, I watch a lot of UK-based podcasters because if I end up having a big crush on one of their projects or yarn, basically, yeah, yarn, I don't want to not be able to buy that yarn. So if I was only watching American podcasters and they kept talking about, say, Brooklyn Tweed or other big brands over there, I'd feel FOMO, fear of missing out, because I would not be able to recreate exactly their projects. And I could substitute and find different yarns to use, but I quite like being able to recreate something like for like exactly up to the colorway. So this is why I watch a lot of UK-based podcasters. I'm sure I'm missing out because I know there's a few that make the exception. A few Canadian podcasters I really like High Fiber Knits and Rachel from Night Sky Knitting. And then who was the third one? I don't know. It might come back later. I'll also try and keep this video like minimal editing so that it's a bit more natural and what's the word? Oh, this is already going awful. Organic? Just to kind of keep this as a chilled, friendly, relaxed vibe where we're just knitting together and chatting instead of me giving a presentation on something. That's not the vibe I want to give. I just have some free knitting time right now, and I'm all makeup up because we're going on a date night tonight. And I thought, I look nice. Let's capture that on the camera and let's film a video today. I usually put a bit of makeup on and maybe do my hair when I film the podcast. I try not to put too much pressure on myself to look my absolute best. It can be a bit nerve-wracking at first when you're filming yourself and putting yourself out there on the internet. You might be tempted to overthink the fact that people are going to judge you, and no one has so far, and the knitting community is really nice and accepting, and it's not really about appearance, is it? It's about the knitting. It's not about what I look like. But still, when you're putting yourself out on YouTube, you think, what if someone points out something about my face or my clothes or the way I look? What if someone notices something that I haven't noticed, like something in my teeth or something, and then they make me feel bad about it? So yeah, I guess those are thoughts that might prevent some people from doing podcasting because they're worried they're going to get negative comments. And I'm really glad to say that hasn't happened to me so far. But I was a bit worried at first about just how permanent things can be and online. But anyway, why did I start talking about that? Oh yeah, so I wanted to film myself today because I had put makeup on, which is a fair enough reason to want to film. I am trying to clear out the needles. I have 2 big test knits right now. I've got the Mist Sketch Sweater by Florence Miller, and then I've got the Pictus Pullover by PetiteKnit. And I've talked about these in the podcast episode that I just released, so I won't go into detail. But those are my 2 main whips, and they're both due at the end of the month, so I really have to get going on them. The Mist Sketch, I just have the ribbing to do at the body, and it's over. And then the Pictus Pullover, I've just split the yoke, so I just have the sleeves and the body to go. And it's cropped, that one, so hopefully it'll be faster, but it's also fingering weight, and color work. So I've really been itching to cast something on. My queue is so long on Ravelry, and I've bought some yarns recently, from multiple sources, and every time I buy yarn, I'm really eager to cast that yarn on and to start a project, but then I'm also always mindful of the fact that I've got yarn in stash that has been languishing for a while. I think my oldest yarn, I started really buying yarn last year, proper yarn for knitting garments. So my oldest yarn is not a year old, which is good, but I'm aware that my stash is enough to last me for more than a year. I don't know. I don't want to calculate because they'll probably stress me out, but I know I have enough yarn to last me a while. So when I buy new yarn, I don't know if I'm allowed to use that or if I should use old yarn. And I work in mental health. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and those words that I've just used, allowed and should, are big red flags. If people use them about themselves, you kind of know that they have very stringent rules that they put on themselves, and it's always interesting to ask people, where are those rules coming from? When you're saying that to yourself, when that voice is saying, you should stop buying yarn, you should cast on this project, you should stop knitting, and you should do chores. Who's that voice? Who's talking to you? Is it a partner? Does your partner maybe say that to you a lot and you've kind of internalized it? Is it a parent? When you were younger and your parent would say, you can't do fun things because you have to do your homework, or, be careful with money? Or is the voice coming from the internet, where maybe the trend, I guess, was to hoard for a while and buy as much yarn as possible, and then the trend now, especially since January, has been destashing and stash busting. And I feel like now you get this kind of like, we're veering dangerously close to people being shamed for buying yarn. I'm not saying that people who are destashing are shaming people who are buying yarn, but we're running the risk of feeling guilty for buying yarn because of, if you're the only one going against the grain and if you're the one who's not worried about destashing, then maybe you're going to feel bad about it eventually when all over social media people are destashing. So anyway, I think it's important to kind of ask yourselves when you're having those thoughts that have the words should and must and allowing, is that coming from a caring perspective? Are you being caring towards yourself, or are you admonishing yourself? And are you shaming yourself? Are you yelling at yourself? Because as productive as we want those things to be, they're not going to be productive. They're going to make us feel bad. You can't shame people into acting differently. They might just keep doing the thing, but with negative feelings added on top of that, which is not helpful. So, unfortunately, yeah, recently I've been feeling a little bit of guilt when planning new projects and buying new yarns, because I have this feeling that I shouldn't buy yarn because I already have enough, blah blah blah. And I am quite a fast knitter, I would say, and I get through projects a good amount. I've been keeping track of the yarn I am using per month and, out. And I've been keeping track of the yarn that's coming in, that I'm buying. And I know a lot of people's goals this year is to have like a net negative or net neutral. And so far I've grown my stash over the last few months since I've started tracking in January. So I've bought more yarn than I've used, which would be easy to feel guilty about. But then I'm also deciding that it's not a problem, it's not something that's inherently bad, or it's not something that I need to fix right now. I'm just aware that I'm in a yarn collecting phase, and it makes me really happy. And then I'm sure that later down the line, I'll go into a whole stash busting phase, which will make me happy in return. And if now I was trying to force myself to stash bust or destash, I would be going against what I want. And so I don't think that I would take much joy from that aspect of the hobby. We often joke with people that knitting is kind of like, I think there's 3 hobbies within knitting. There's knitting, making stitches and making garments. But before that, there's project planning. And then I think there's the yarn buying aspect that comes even before that. Or during the project planning, I guess. I can spend hours and have spent hours for projects just thinking of patterns, yarns, modifications. Then there's like sourcing the yarn, especially if it's something that's maybe not as easy to get in the UK, trying to find the best deals. Like I try and find shops that don't have a huge markup, and also discounts. I am always on the hunt for discounts on yarns and patterns, and I find quite a lot of satisfaction in, like, for example, I plan for a project and I just earmark it somewhere, I put my notes somewhere, and I know that if that yarn ever goes on sale, then I'll buy it. But there's no point in buying it right now because it could always go on sale later. But then the problem with that approach is that sometimes yarn goes on sale and I know what project I want to do with it, so I buy it. But then I buy faster than I knit. So hence having a big stash, because if you're always on the hunt for discounts, then you might start to get clouded by like the realistic time frame in which you can knit. So like I said, I want to keep this light, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but I wanted to talk about trends on Instagram. I find it very fascinating how like a color has been trending. I'll put a photo here, but it's like the bright lime, sunny lime, kind of green, yellow-ish color. I find it very interesting that it's a color that is trending instead of a pattern or a texture or a motif. I like the fact that it's a color because that means that people can hop on the trend in like as much as they feel comfortable. Like it is very easy to just find that color. It's not like you have to only buy one brand of yarn or, you know, do one type of project. You could do a beanie in that color and that will be you being on trend. So color being trendy seems to be more accessible if trends are something that you care about. I also find it to be quite like a self-fulfilling prophecy where if people start talking about colors or things being on trend, then they will become trendy by the mere fact of them being mentioned. So for example, ever since High Fiber Knits talked about that sunny lime color, I've been seeing it everywhere. And then there's a confirmation bias that if I see it, it confirms in my mind that I'm seeing it everywhere. And I think trends are not necessarily harmful. You know, some people like being on trend. Some people try to go against it on purpose. Some people, for example, would make a point of not buying that lime color because they don't want to be seen as doing what everyone else is doing. And I completely get that. Sometimes, you know, if someone tells me to do something, that makes me want to not do something. But then, yeah, there's nothing wrong with wanting to follow the trend, to hop on the train. When the Issachar Breeze collection was released last month, like week by week, I was obsessed with it. I was searching all the hashtags. I follow a lot of the test knitters, so I was seeing quite a lot of the projects in my feed. I don't like the way that Instagram has changed now, where when you go on your homepage, it doesn't just show you the people you're following, it shows you like the first 4 posts are people that you follow, and then it's just ads and suggested content. And if I wanted suggested content, I would go on the explore page. I just want to see my curated feed of people that I follow, but Instagram doesn't show me that. It shows me what it wants me to see and what it thinks I want to see. And it doesn't know what I want to see. It doesn't understand it. What I want to see would be lesser known people and non-influencers and people that have, you know, less than 1,000 or 2,000 followers, let's say. I want to see normal people's knits and styling and everything, which is also why I love Ravelry. I much prefer it over Instagram, to be honest, because sometimes on Instagram you can't even see the knitwear because the photos are just so aesthetic and edited and posed in certain ways and angles, and like you see a shoulder shot detail and it's like, that's great, but is it cropped? What's the ease? You know, how tall is the person? And then when you go on Ravelry, people are just showing, you know, like literally, here's me in front of my wardrobe with my like arms out showing the knitwear. And I love that because then you can actually see the details of the product. Some designers, for example, they're known for only showing photos of the finished object and the design with very heavily edited photos and staged and everything. And I personally don't think that that's a fair way of showing your product. I'd like to see your product in its full in full and with flaws and everything, because I'm sure like a knitwear can't be perfect, and if you made a choice, for example, about like raglan, the way that you'd shape your raglan, and if it creates a bit of extra fabric and you just couldn't fix that, then that's fine. But I'd like to know that before going into it, that there's going to be a bit of extra fabric bunching, which I wouldn't want them to hide that in the pattern photos by just always showing photos of like the back or like cropped and not showing the shoulder, you know what I mean? So Instagram can be very deceptive in that sense, that it doesn't show you a real picture of a pattern, and then you do the pattern and then it obviously ends up like it looks like in real life. You have it in front of you and that's your project, and it doesn't look insta worthy. Like sometimes I worry because I have my works in progress photos and they look all bumpy and uneven, and I know that most of that goes away when blocking. But when I see people's like posts of work in progress photos, their stitches aren't bumpy and it looks blocked. It makes me wonder, are those influencers blocking their whips before photographing them for Instagram? Or is my tension just bad? Is my yarn just worse than theirs at showing those bumps? And then it just creates that cycle of comparison where you're just wondering, why is my thing not looking good and other people's are looking good. And when it's Instagram, it's so easy to compare yourself to the top people and everyone that's better than you or has more followers than you or has all the best quality products, and they have all the time in the world to knit because that's their job and they make income from their Instagram. And that's just not your life. Like, that's not my life personally. So maybe to feel better, what I can compare myself to is like people who don't knit. And the difference between them and me is that I have homemade clothes or hand knitted clothes, and that makes me feel good because it's like, I know it's maybe not the best to compare yourself to others, but like if you must compare yourself, at least get a representative sample. You know, how many knitting influencers do you know in real life, and how many like normal people do you know in real life? So you can't say that you're like at the bottom 1%. Chances are on a normal distribution you're always going to be in the middle anyway, and it just all depends on the sample. I really am struggling with this knit and chat. I'm so worried that this is going to be too serious or that I'm going to say something wrong. I feel like that's another thing. Like I talked about appearance earlier, but there's also the thing about what if I say something and I can't take it back? When I'm editing my videos, I'm always keeping an ear out for, you know, if I ever say something that I regret saying, I'll cut it out. But that has never really happened. The times where I have something not positive to say about someone or something, I think about it a bit longer. Like I think twice, like, do I want to leave that in? But I don't want my YouTube channel to just be one huge positive festival of compliments and, you know, hypocritical niceties. But I also obviously don't want to be bullying anyone or insulting and freely, you know, gratuitous putting other people down. And I'm sure there's a rightful middle between those two extremes. So if something displeases me or if I'm disappointed, I want to say that. It's so important for me to not be scared of voicing a negative opinion. I find that can be quite prevalent in the knitting and the crochet community, where the toxic positivity is something that I feel feelings about, where I don't think it's helpful to always force positivity. And people are allowed to have feelings, and I feel very strongly about that as an applied psychologist. It's so important to not shame people for emotions. And yes, that includes negative emotions, like stuff like jealousy. I think there's also a stigma, or, you know, you can't say that you feel jealous because it's an ugly emotion. And sure, like, no one wants to be jealous or envious. But the fact is, we will be. I'm sure that everyone has experienced jealousy at one point or another. And so, like I said earlier, shaming yourself for feeling jealous won't make you feel any less jealous. It'll make you feel jealous and then guilty and then maybe sad. And then you're going to have those kind of thoughts of like, I'm a bad person, and, you know, other people can just get on with it. Why am I so jealous? And I think that's why it's important to voice negative things when they happen, to normalize them, as opposed to the toxic positivity where people pretend like they're happy all the time and successful all the time, etc. So like I feel like there's been a bit of a shift recently, like with mental health and stuff, where people are more accepting of sadness as like an emotion and anxiety, which is great. But I think we should also normalize other emotions like jealousy, anger as well, and laziness, boredom. Like I think it's okay to be lazy. And in this kind of society where we're always pushed to do more and monetize our hobbies and always be better, like always be a better version than yourself than you were the previous year or whatever, like always improve and always do something. Like if I'm not knitting, I must do a chore, and if I'm not doing a chore, I must see my friends, and I must. And I really want to normalize laziness and doing nothing. I think a good Saturday is a Saturday where, like, I didn't do anything. I like doing my chores in the working day so that my weekend is not spent doing chores. Of course, it depends on how you're living, if you have a partner, if you have children, if you have shift work and not a 9 to 5, if you go in the office, if you commute. But I try and get all the stuff done, like, in the day, and then I can relax. And sometimes I feel guilty when I'm not knitting, because then I feel like I should be knitting. And again, there we go. Here's a red flag. No, I should not be knitting. No one should do anything. Speaking of trends again, I've been thinking of the fact that last year I was doing basically all PetiteKnit patterns. The first sort of patterns I did were like the Marseille sweater, the Louvre sweater, the Champagne cardigan, the No Frills sweater. Those were my first 4, like, last year. And it was great, and I loved it. And then recently, like, back when I started the channel and started watching more podcasters and everything, I heard all the negative things people had to say about PetiteKnit, and how she's not the only one out there that does great basic patterns, and other lesser known designers deserve just as much fame and hype, and she doesn't need the advertising because she's well known. Other people deserve more spotlight, and I totally agree with that. But then again, it brings that sort of negative, like, are you allowed to talk about PetiteKnit? Like, I feel like a lot of people are apologizing or apologetic when they bring up PetiteKnit. They're like, oh, I know it's another PetiteKnit pattern, but here it is. And I've been guilty of doing that in some of my videos. And recently I've been adding a lot of her projects on my queue, and I was thinking of what I'm going to cast on after I do my test knits. And I've been thinking of the fact that I want to make the Leon sweater, the new one with stripes, and I want to make the Cumulus blouse, and I want to make the Friday tee and the Anchor tee, and all of those are PetiteKnit patterns. And I was kind of worried in a way that if that's what my next podcast is all about, are people going to be mad at me? Are people going to say that I should go back to shouting out smaller designers and branching out? I said to myself I wanted to, this year, try out more designers, and I've been loving it because I've been discovering a lot of different styles of writing patterns. Some of them have really thrown me out of my depth, and it takes me a while to settle into the pattern and get used to it. And other times the patterns are very, very similar to PetiteKnit, so I just get on with it. I kind of want to break out of the habits I formed in terms of expecting PetiteKnit written patterns. I just want to not have expectations when I read a pattern and just see what is coming my way, instead of comparing things to PetiteKnit, because she's not the standard. She shouldn't be. But then I've been thinking that it's a little silly to worry about what people might think if I mention PetiteKnit. I'm allowed to talk about PetiteKnit if I want to. And knitting as a hobby, the point of that is to bring me joy and relax me and make some homemade clothes that I will wear for, hopefully, a long time. So I said to myself when I started the channel, I really didn't want my knitting to change for the channel. I just want the channel to be documenting my knitting as it exists and unfolds. And I try to be mindful of that as I'm doing my episodes. I'm trying to ask myself whether my podcast has changed anything for me knitting-wise. I think it hasn't sometimes. I think it has sometimes forced me to finish projects, which is a good thing. Things that I would have been putting off for a while, like socks or like knitting buttons or weaving in ends and blocking. I've been much better at doing them faster, so that I can talk about them on the podcast. So I asked myself, what has changed? Or has anything changed? The other thing that's changed is that I've been buying more yarn, and I'm so aware of that. When I wasn't doing the podcast, I wasn't buying as much. So that's another thing that I want to be mindful of and be careful to not go into dangerous territory where I'm buying things just to talk about them. it really wouldn't be healthy. I want to buy things because I'm going to make projects with them at a reasonable pace. So I'm keeping an eye on that. What I don't want to do is to do projects because people want to hear about them, or like what will be successful for the podcast. Like if there was a trend, for example, and that I knew if I did that project and made a title that had that in the thumbnail or whatever, people would click on it. Like that's all great, but do I actually like the pattern? And would I have made it if it wasn't for the podcast? And if the answer is no, then I don't want to make that, because the podcast is just a witness to my primary hobby, which is knitting. Podcasting, I guess, is the second hobby. Well, behind knitting plans and knitting acquisitions. I've been feeling a little overwhelmed lately with the planning because I feel like there's a few things at play and some of them aren't compatible with others. So, for example, it's not rules per se, but it's kind of like criteria that I try and meet. So, for example, I want to do new projects. I want to try other designers than PetiteKnit. I try never to buy the same yarn twice or color. I want to buy things that are affordable. I try not to buy t-shirt quantities that are like more than £50 and sweaters that are more than 100, like at the very max, unless it's something special that, you know, I was saving up for or is special for another reason. But I try my usual sweaters and usual projects not to exceed those amounts. And if they do, with like the recommended yarn or something, or a yarn that I lust after, then I'll think twice and maybe do a yarn substitution to be more affordable. I also would like to use some of my scraps. Like, for example, if I have enough scraps to make stripes, then it could be great to find a project where I can use those stripes. Or if I have some mohair and I just need like one more ball to make a project, then try and do that. So that's another criteria that I try to do. I'm trying to be a bit more like seasonally aware, so I'm trying to not do any big winter projects right now, which is a little bit like breaking my heart because I have a lot in stash that I want to cast on, like cabled Aran jumpers, and I want to use my mohair stash. Like I have some nice mohair quantities, and like Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool, which is this big like Peruvian. Is it Aran or like what's the one under Aran? Worsted, heavy DK. Anyway, it's a big one, ish. And I'm trying not to cast on any of those winter projects because I know I'm allowed to. That's fine. There's no rule. But I know as well that if I finish the project and then I can't wear it for like the next 6 months, I'm worried that when it comes to being able to wear it, I'll have lost the flame and like other things will have been exciting since, and I'll be excited to cast on new projects like by then. And so that one will go under the radar, and I don't want any of my knitting to go under the radar. I want them to get the attention and use that they deserve from me, like the attention. I want to treat them all equally, you know, no favorites. Although there are, of course, favorites. But I don't want to neglect any of my knits and move on to the next one without giving them their proper outings. So yeah, so knitting seasonally, I want to knit right now for spring and summer. And I don't know how many rules that is now that I've just listed, but that's quite a lot of things to consider when choosing my knits. I guess also like, do I want to do fingering or DK? Do I want to do accessories, or do I just want to focus my knitting time on sweaters and garments? Like, I'm making this hat right now, which I was trying to just save for social knitting, like when I'm with friends or even public transport knitting. And then I'm working on it now because this is kind of social. And I'm going on date night tonight, so I'll take that for the train to Glasgow. I don't think I'll knit in the pub because I'll be with my boyfriend and just speaking to him. I don't think he'd be mad if I was knitting while talking to him at date night, but I want it to be quality one-on-one time, not one-on-one with the knitting, third wheeling. But anyway, so all of those things have been going on in my mind while I've been thinking of what project to cast on after I finish my 2 test knits, because my needles will be free, the world will be my oyster, and I can just start on the new wave of projects. Like I've been talking about how excited I am because I'm not a monogamous knitter, so I'll definitely cast on 2-3 new projects soon. And I've been thinking maybe like 1 camisole, 1 t-shirt, 1 sweatshirt, like sweater. And I'm saying that really easily right now, but that comes from hours of thinking and planning. And I've been thinking of what camisole and what color and what yarn and what sweater and blah blah blah. And I've been spending a lot of time on that. I've spent countless hours on Ravelry and on yarn shop websites, like adding things in the basket, checking the color stocks, making notes on Ravelry, going on Instagram to check the hashtags. And it's so tough because I like it. I really enjoy planning. Even in my normal life, like in other aspects, I'm such a planner. You know, bullet journals, that other craze that was happening like a few years ago, I was totally on that. I loved it. To-do lists are my best friends. One day, I promise, I will make a YouTube video on my Excel tracker for knitting related things. I've got like the biggest master Excel spreadsheet, and I'm so proud of it. It's my baby. So I want to talk about that at some point. But anyway, I love planning and tracking. But sometimes I get sucked into it and then I start feeling overwhelmed, is the best way to describe it. So the other day I was basically planning a lot of stripes projects, and what was going on in my mind is that I didn't want to end up with, let's say, 10 garments at the end of the year that had stripes and then all of them to be the same color. The risk is for me to end up with a lot of garments with white stripes, because I'm not the biggest fan of a white garment with colored stripes. Like, I really don't like white garment and navy stripes. I hate that. No offense. And I'm never going to do that. So what I might do is a navy garment with white stripes. But usually I don't even like navy and white, so my Marseille sweater was not at all what the picture looked like. Which was white with navy stripes. It was dusty rouge with white stripes. Then my step-by-step sweater was light grey with white stripes. And recently I've been planning a lot of projects, and I've been trying to keep in mind the fact that I already have 2 things with white stripes, and do I need more? And I thought it would be pretty silly to stop myself from making more because of the fact that I already have 2. Because the fact I have 2 means that that's what I like. So why stop myself from doing more of that? And I think it's something that comes up a lot with color choices, where when you're picking your colors, are you picking the color based on what, like, do you like the color of the yarn? But would you like that as a garment? Like, especially for hand-dyed yarn, that is so important to ask yourself. Like, sure, it looks pretty on the skein, but would it look pretty plastered all over your body in such proportions? There is so much noise coming from both directions right now. Okay, great. So the other thing is, are you choosing a color based on the wardrobe that you have and like it would go well with it because you already have lots of it? Or are you picking a color that's missing from your wardrobe because you're filling in that gap? Like, I don't think I want to end up with a wardrobe that is all different colors, like all my knitwear to all be different colors of the rainbow and all the different neutrals. I'd rather it was somewhat, well, like, aligned to my taste. Like, for example, I don't think I want a full purple jumper because I don't like purple. But I've been wanting to experiment with some purple, maybe in stripes. So I've recently bought some purple to make stripes, which is out of my comfort zone. And so that knit will fulfill that aspect. It's not necessarily for the wardrobe, like, I know that I will like it, and it's more for, I want to see if maybe I've dismissed purple too early and whether I enjoy it. And if I don't, that's fine. I don't think I'm ever going to make something that I hate. So even if I end up with a sweater that I feel lukewarm about, I'll still wear it. Because, for example, I know that I don't like neon yellow, so I'll never buy neon yellow. But purple is like, the jury's still out. What else? What else? If you're still here, thank you for not quitting after the first couple rambles. I guess this entire thing is a ramble. I think something to also kind of bring it all together is like Instagram and inspiration and overwhelm. So Instagram I use as a tool to get inspired and also to get information and to help me with project planning. But then if I use it too much or if I get sucked in, it gets overwhelming and it has a negative effect instead of helping me out. And I think that's just going to be the nature of the beast, you know. It's Instagram. That's the way it is. That's the way it was designed. Like, let's not go into a whole rant, but social media is meant to try and capture your attention and suck you in as much as possible. So they will be addictive in that sense. And it's really up to you to be aware of that and to notice the signs in yourself that you're getting overwhelmed or that you're getting more bad than good. And then if you are able to remove yourself from the situation when it's getting too much, then you won, you know, and social media didn't get one over you. It's kind of like the free offers that they do on gambling, where like, oh, you can gamble your first like £10 and we'll give you £10 for free, so you get a free bet. Like, you could win out of that scenario because you're getting free money or nothing at the end of the day, but they're betting on the fact that that first thing is going to hook you in and then you're going to keep betting afterwards, and that's where they make their money. You know, nothing is ever free out of the pure goodness of their heart. It's because they statistically are likely to get something out of it, otherwise they wouldn't do it. So Instagram is like that, where they might get something out of you, and you know, companies might get your money and convince you that you need to buy things that you don't, but you don't have to let them. You can use the free inspiration that you get from Instagram and tips and styling ideas and project ideas. You can follow a yarn company even if you never intend to use their yarn, to see kind of like color ideas and pattern ideas. It doesn't mean that you need to use their yarn to make those patterns, but you really have to be aware of not doing things automatically. I think is something that's very important. Same for just the force of habit of going on Instagram first thing in the morning or last thing before you go to bed. Just because it's like on your home screen on your phone, or like, I don't know, if you're waiting somewhere and you take your phone out and you go on social media, all of those are habits, and habits can get extinct the same way that they got created. And you used to have lots of habits that you don't have anymore. So just because it's like this now doesn't mean that it has to be like that forever. But what I'm trying to say is that if I go on Instagram for 5 minutes and that turns into 10, that can be bad. But maybe if I went into it telling myself I'm going on it for literally 4 minutes, I will set a timer on my phone, be there for 4, and then leave, I'm sure I'll not miss anything by leaving after 4 minutes. But then going back to what I was saying before, is that healthy to be so restrictive? It's really tricky. I'm not trying to preach or convince you of anything, by the way. I'm kind of just thinking out loud. I still haven't figured out where I stand on a lot of those things, and opinions can change a lot as well. So I really hope that this doesn't come off as, preachy or conspiracy theory or anti-social media. I'm just trying to voice what I've been going through over the last couple of weeks, like knitting and social media wise. Like, I'm okay. I'm all happy and healthy and taking a lot of pleasure out of knitting and planning and buying yarn. It's all great. But I just wanted to mention that there are negative emotions that exist and they can coexist together. I think it's also important not to see things on like as a binary or either or scenario. I can feel excited about my new yarn purchase and also feel a little guilty. And that's okay. Or I can feel really happy about having finished a project and yet be a little disappointed that it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted. And I can feel excited and looking forward to all the future knits I'm gonna do, and also feeling overwhelmed at this like blank page syndrome of, but which one will I cast on next? So I think that's a good place to stop now. It was definitely out of my comfort zone to just literally turn on the record button and start rambling. Like I said, I usually am quite mindful of what I want to be on the channel and like what I want to stay out there. And it can be a little nerve-wracking to wonder how things are going to get received. So I'd love to know how you experienced this video, and if it's not the kind of content that you want, obviously you don't have to watch it if you don't like it. But if it is the kind of content that you want to see more of, then I'll be happy to do other knits and chats like that in the future. I'll be happy to do another Q&A or something at some point as well for like new people since the latest Q&A. And because things change anyway and there's always questions. But let me know how this kind of video was, and please, 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 I would love to hear your thoughts on any of the things I've mentioned before. If anything I said you like particularly agree with, and if it resonates with you and you want to share maybe your story or like how you've experienced social media and stuff, please let me know. And if there's something that you completely disagree with me on, then I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it's also dangerous sometimes when everyone agrees with each other and you get that confirmation bias that that opinion is the right opinion, because you don't know that other people have a different opinion. But so let me know if you have a different opinion, and hopefully we can all learn from each other and see different sides of a story. But I'm happy I did this. It was quite lovely to just get it all out in the open. I do feel better having talked about all this. Like I feel a bit more organized with my thoughts. It's kind of like a diary where you'd write your thoughts down in your journal and then you'd feel better. I hope that the sound quality wasn't too bad. It's probably a good thing that I stopped now anyway, because the noise doesn't seem to be stopping, and I will have cut some of the worst bits out, but I know you'll have been able to hear some of it, so sorry. I will see you very soon for a next podcast episode where hopefully I will show you at least one finished test knit, and then maybe more things will be finished by then. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I think I did a bit of progress. I didn't put a stitch marker before, but I think like I'm at halfway point now, and I have to do like the other half of the hat, I would say. I don't know. Like I said, let me know in the comments what you think of all of that, and then if you're enjoying this type of content, then give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all later. Have a really good rest of your week and happy knitting. Bye everyone!